So, welcome to this session. This is Amy Thompson from Open Finance. Agilista Systems Limited, the Scrum Mistress, as she bills herself. Look at the profile on Hoover, give you all the details, another plug for the app there, from my point of view. But we've got a 45-minute session and then some questions at the end. So, without further ado, Amy.
Thanks. Hi everybody, thanks for coming. Agilista is my company. I'm contracting at the moment for it again, so that might be confusing. So I'm glad everyone's come, more than actually can see my band in the past, so that's nice. So if I could just start off the session, just getting everyone just to stand up for me a moment. Stand up. Fabulous. So good afternoon everybody. Are we all well?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so we're now 4 talks in to our Agile Beach Conference 2015. I'm going to go next, and now you can all be seated. So the reason that I've done that is I'm just showing you a little bit of insight into how I implement discipline and structure, one of the many ways that I do, into the Scrum process. So just by doing that very slight exercise, I can see that some of you are a bit more vocal than others, and you might be more shy than others, and actually, on the whole, you're actually having a great time. It's the sort of thing I do in stand-ups in the morning, just to see who's feeling great, who's ready to go, who's hungover. So, as Mark introduced, I am Amy Thompson. I'm a Scrum Master and an Agile coach. I have implemented Agile practice in various verticals such as telco, R&GE, finance, and also languages as well, language industry, which is really great. Just with regards to that last one, I was actually fortunate enough to be Best Agile Coach and Mentor at the UK Agile Awards in 2013, and I was a panellist last year. And when I was a panellist, I was like, wow, actually, this was quite hard. I thought it was just because I was a woman that I won, but it's actually quite good. So I was really pleased with that. And today I'd just like to share my experiences with you of what I have learned just personally, really. Obviously I implement Scrum for a living, but very similar things happen in each place I go, really, and I just want to share that with you, kind of what my reality of Scrum adoption actually is. So the structure of today's talk will be kind of in 3 levels: preparation, implementation, and maturity. So the first is about understanding the problem that you're trying to solve and why as a business. Increasing buy-in by engaging everyone in the Agile transition decision. Agreeing a strategy. Employing the appropriate level of coaching. Being realistic with your expectations of the Scrum adoption. And the people who are taking part in it, and also about keeping going. Don't lose your nerve, and sometimes things might become a bit tough. Valuing discipline and structure with Scrum, and then finally, once you know what you're doing, inspect and adapt, and then be creative with it. I'm not for 1 second saying that discipline and structure in Scrum stifles creativity. What I'm saying is, if you learn it properly, and you do it properly, then you could go on to be incredibly creative because your relationships with your teams and your business will be stronger. So I'm just going to talk about, first of all, the benefits, or just some benefits of doing Scrum properly. I'm yet to go into an organisation that has performed worse since the Scrum adoption. So even if it's been tough for teams at the start, in the end, they've always done much better, significantly better. There's always been increased and more predictable delivery. So people are getting better at delivering, when in some cases, like the company that I've worked in recently, have not been delivering for quite a long amount of time. The quality of the software is better because mainly you're bringing people together more. It's not necessarily people are suddenly better developers or better testers because of Scrum, but it's that interaction and that collaborative underpinning of Scrum that makes that happen. Better relationships between business and tech teams will form. Like, for example, again, company that I'm in at the moment, everyone's blaming each other You know, tech were blaming the business. They don't know what they want. The requirements are all over the place. Business were blaming tech, going, oh, they're so unapproachable. I don't know how to talk to them. It was just, you know, the relationships was the problem. More contented teams come out of those relationships being better, and that comes from the Scrum process, putting the right people in the right place at the right time. More on that later. Disciplined Scrum will get you there faster, not just because you'll be following a process where perhaps there hasn't been one, but also the problems will be exposed earlier, and you have to deal with those problems if you want the benefits. Finally, we have increased creativity at that point when everybody knows what's expected of them and how this thing works. Then you can come forward and start being really creative. And how far can you push this thing? It will be appreciated in the end. I'm going to talk about resistance a little bit later on in this talk. But what I do want to say is that, yes, there might be some difficulties and some problems and some resistance and fear. But in the end, it will be great. Can you tell I love Scrum? So the next thing we're going to talk about now is about the common problems I've seen. I mentioned earlier. And I know these problems not just by going into companies and seeing them for myself, but also by coming to events like this a couple of years ago when I came to Agile on the beach and I was talking to people and saying, what's your business and what do you do? And I had a CEO sat next to me like, oh yes, we've got this real difficult problem, and you know, I was like, you're the CEO. Surely you can do something about it. Oh yes, I think I could. Yes, you can. So the first thing anyway is the lack of buy-in that I've seen, you know, throughout the organisation, mainly at a very senior level. You know, people don't really want this to happen, and if it's not, if everyone's not on the same page and not everybody is working towards the same goal, then you are going to struggle with the Scrum adoption. It's about realigning people to want the same thing, but they have to understand it in order for that to happen. Lack of knowledge and experience of doing Scrum properly. Yeah, you know, you're not going to have a successful adoption if people don't really know what they're doing or why they're doing it. You know, if you've not seen it done well before, then how do you know you're doing it well now? I've often had people come up to me and say, you know, well, in my old company we used to do this. And I was like, oh, right, did you? And I think, oh, no. Lack of discipline as well, not doing Scrum properly. Scrum but, and for those of you who are unaware, Scrum but is, you know, bits of Scrum, but taking out all the hard bits because it's too hard, because those hard bits that could lead to breakthroughs. Lack of experience or courage to deal with the issues Scrum exposes. So what's the point in implementing this framework that will expose to you very clearly what the problems are if you're not going to do anything about it? It's then that it's very critical, because dealing with those problems will not only set a precedent to everyone else and say these problems will be dealt with, but it will also help you get there faster to get to that end goal of Scrum working really well for you. Finally, getting in the wrong help. You know, so I've been in companies before where they've said to me, oh yes, our last Scrum Master was just obsessed with burn down charts, and that's all he cared about. You know, so it was difficult for a company then to employ another Scrum Master because, you know, they think, oh, what if they do the same again? It's very hard to overcome somebody who's kind of done it badly in the past. So moral preparation then. So this applies to companies who are about to do a transition, or to a company who have already tried to do a transition in Scrum but actually haven't done very well so far. They're not seeing the results that they should have seen if they were doing it properly. So, first of all, and I think we alluded to this in the last talk, you've got to kind of retrospect, really, to understand why you want to move forwards. What is the problem? Why do you want Scrum? You know? Is it because you've got a problem with delivery? And why is that problem with delivery? Is it a problem with equality? You know, maybe Scrum could help you with that in terms of maybe you can introduce TDD, although that Scrum doesn't necessarily say you have to do that. Culture and relationships. Now this is often a big one. Do you have a cultural problem that is a legacy issue from years and years and years? It might be a very established company with a very established culture. You know, do you have relationship problems? And where do those relationship problems exist? Is it within the teams? Or is it within management? Or is it even higher still, at board level? Or is it a problem with your process? Do you not have a process? You know, is that the problem? You know, and asking yourself these questions will often get you a good head start before you even start getting a coaching. Who wants Scrum? You know, why have you decided that Scrum is what you need? So here's some do's and don'ts from a board level. Do not implement Scrum if you know little or nothing about it, and you think it's up to everyone else to make it work. It absolutely isn't up to everyone else. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Do implement it because you understand Scrum and you want the adoption to succeed more than anything else throughout the whole company. You have to be very enthusiastic about the success of Scrum in your company. Do implement it if you are ready to be a servant leader, and that's very important. You can't think about implementing a Scrum or an Agile approach if you think it's up to everyone else. If you're ready to make those changes, use your authority for good, for the good of the company, then that's a great time for you to go forward. So what about senior leadership teams then? Don't implement it if you just want to look good. You know, if you think, ooh, that'll get me a bonus this year, yes, can do that. Don't implement it if you've heard it's what everyone else is doing now. Again, you don't understand what you're doing and why. You need to understand. Do implement it if you're ready for a challenge, and do implement it if you also are ready to be a servant leader, because you're the buffer between the board and the teams. You're going to hear a lot of problems, but you are also responsible for helping those people through them. Finally, from a team's perspective, don't implement if you aren't prepared to be disciplined. You know, Agile isn't doing whatever you want, you know, thinking, oh, right, we're all Agile now. We don't have to follow a process, we don't have to do this, we don't have to do that. Wrong. Scrum has very strict rules, and you absolutely do. And if you do them well, that's when you'll get the benefits. Okay, so what's the plan then? The plan could be orientated around coaching, training and support. You've got to provide those things if you want people to succeed. And you've got to do them really well and sustain those things. You need to explain the implementation plan to everyone and the benefits that's expected of them. So everyone needs to be clear. That will help you with your buy-in. I've experienced in the past where teams have said to me, well, we had no idea that, you know, management are unhappy. How come you're here? It's like, well, okay, so, you know, it's a shock to people sometimes. So you need to be transparent about your intentions. Set realistic timescales and expectations. You know, for the size of your company, I think it's proportionate as well. If you've got a small company with a couple of teams, I don't think it's unrealistic to be, you know, doing Scrum really well in 6 months. However, if you've got a large enterprise with hundreds of people, it might take a couple of years. Also, the thing that people seem to overlook is HR. HR needs to be involved massively, I think, because, you know, there might be roles that need changing, project managers, BAs, they might need changing, you know, realigning to like Scrum Masters or product owners or, you know, even testers or whatever they want to do within the Scrum roles. But again, they need that support. So, what's the coaching strategy? You need to coach appropriate to your company size. Again, if you've just got a small company, just one coach or even a Scrum Master might suffice. But if you've got a huge company, you can't just have one coach in there trying to get around everybody. It's just like painting the fourth bridge. You've got to have the ability to have a little bit of traction. And also coach for different areas. So again, this applies mainly if you've got a huge company, but you know, you might need somebody who will handle the board and leadership teams. Somebody who's like on the ground, working with the teams, like a Scrum Master type role. Somebody who can tackle the rest of the company, so departments outside of tech. And finally, the coaches must be on the same page. If you've got multiple coaches, they all have to be aligned with the same strategy. It would be absolutely disastrous if you had several coaches that are all pulling in different areas. Okay, so let's talk now about the implementation stage. So when I talk about this, I'm talking about newbies and companies doing Scrum, but you know, if you're already doing it, it's a re-education process. You know, into what's actually good Scrum. It's cultural reform, and you know, you need to get it right from the start, from the best of your ability. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about management's responsibility in that a little bit later. But if you do the best you can for your company, then that's how you set your company and the people within it up for success. Okay, my advice, whether people like it or not, is if you're implementing Scrum, you do it by the book to start with. Okay? And the reasons are that Scrum has rules and it's discipline that makes it amazing. Okay? Scrum's iterative process means it doesn't take long to gain experience. So if you do it properly, even though it might be hard for a very short time, because Scrum's iterative process is so fast, it doesn't actually take you very long to get that good at it. So if you're having trouble or you're struggling with it, you can get a lot of practice in a very short space of time. Good practice and behaviours are learned. So we're addressing those cultural issues, you know, and we're addressing the process issues, again, very quickly, and we're learning how to behave. Teams can be empowered to improve processes when they understand why. Okay, so do it by the book so you understand why. So what makes a great sprint planning meeting? You know, why we're here, what do we get out of it, what helps us? You only learn that, in my opinion, if you do it properly, by the book. Resistance is just fear. There's no people who are just inherently bad people who work for us, you know. They're not being difficult because they're evil and they want it all to fail. They're not. They're just scared, and that's okay. It's understandable to be scared. It's a new thing. They might be fantastic developers or testers or UX experts, but they might not be great Scrum team members yet. And it's hard to remember that sometimes as a coach, but you have to remember that, you know. These people will probably end up sometimes being the biggest advocate once they get it. So with this sort of situation, you just need to reiterate the plan and the benefits that we're all aiming for. You know, reminding them of we're all in this same boat together. You know, we're all finding it a bit tough right now, but you know what? This is what we're going to achieve at the end of it. You know, and I have absolute confidence that anybody can do Scrum properly if they really want to. Encourage those who want to get involved. Peers are really powerful, so it's much more powerful for somebody within the team who are bought in and involved to then go to someone else within their team, or even in another team, and advocate the process to them. Much, much more than me. So treat those people like gold. They're your friends. They will help. Champion every little success, even with people who don't really know much about Scrum. So, for example, when I worked in a company, the CTO didn't really know what this whole Scrum thing was. I dragged him into an office with, you know, after we'd done a retrospection, and there was post-it notes everywhere. I said, hey, come and have a look at this. Isn't it great? The teams are talking to each other. And, you know, he sort of was like, yeah, okay, yeah. So the profile of Scrum was being raised and the success of Scrum was being raised. If we had a great release, I was straight in that office again. Hey, did you hear about that fantastic release we did? It was great. Okay, so the profile starts getting raised. People start hearing about Scrum being successful and less about Scrum being painful. Many small successes lead to many big ones. So doing those little things, those little PR exercises, saying thanks to your team for a great day, they all add up to make Scrum adoption successful. But it has to be relentless. Do it every single day. As soon as you see something great, say thanks, that was great. You know, that was a great meeting, that was a great retrospective, that was a great stand-up. Yeah, keep reinforcing this positive. Some people just resist because they've not seen it yet. They just need to see it to believe it. I can tell people until I'm blue in the face, like I am now probably, that Scrum is great and it will work. But some people just have have to see it to believe it. They don't know what they don't know. Okay? They need some confidence and they need some experience, and you don't get one without the other. So it's just a matter of bearing with those people sometimes and saying, okay, just give it a little bit of time, okay? It'll be cool, I promise you, alright? Resistance is generally short-lived. And I experience it a lot because obviously most of the time I go in from a contractor point of view or into a company that's not done Scrum properly yet. So I get that resistance. It's like, you come in here, tell me what to do. You know, I'll show you, Scrum Mistress. But resistance is generally very short-lived. Once they start to see the benefits of Scrum for themselves and they get better at it and they see, actually, it's not that bad. It's actually sometimes a bit better, but we don't want to know about it. So be courageous. This is very important. Okay, you need to ride out the storm. This initial wave of discontent, you know, it's only going to be short-lived, but it's very difficult, I appreciate. So management have a responsibility to avoid failure of Scrum adoption at all costs, because failure is going to be very costly because it will damage people's confidence, not just the teams, but management as well. So you have to stand up as a manager at this time. So when I say that, I mean, you know, if you've got people in the team who are absolutely resolute that they are not going to do this, management has to take responsibility for that and decide what they're going to do about it. Are they going to realign this person to another area that's not quite into the Scrum adoption yet and maybe bring them back in later? Or are they going to take maybe tougher decisions than that? So management have a responsibility to avoid this failure, but they have to be facilitative as much as possible. So I'm not saying, hey, you know, you're not doing this, out. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying people have to be management have to be responsible in the way that they approach this. They have to provide the support, but they have to do what I would call a reasonable amount of time in order for people to change. Teams have a responsibility to change your attitude. So, you know, we all understand the plan. We all understand what's expected of us. It's now up to us to take responsibility ourselves. And again, I stress, the support should be there, the training should be there. But it is, at the end of the day, up to the individual person to come along with us. Finally, Scrum Masters and Agile coaches have a responsibility to have difficult conversations at all levels. So I don't just mean talking to that one difficult person in the team, you know, why are you doing this? No. I'm talking about even at board level. You know, saying to the board, if you don't do this, then this adoption is at risk. And sometimes that's tough. I've been in meeting rooms before and, you know, started off my conversation like, I think you need to do this. You know, I've been a little bit scared, but hey, it is a bit scary sometimes because my job might be at risk, but I do it because I believe that it's the right thing to do. It's hard to be courageous. I know that more than anyone. Okay, it is tough. It's hard for management and it's hard for teams. Maybe I should have put one on there, it's hard for Agile coaches as well. But for management it's tough because they're faced with making big decisions. You know, change is looming and it's scary, I know that. They're under pressure to prove that the decisions that they've made are the right ones. You know, was it a good decision to get that Scrum Master in? Oh my God, I hope so. They're under pressure to meet targets through a transition. You know, they might not be as aggressive as they were previously, but the targets nonetheless, you can't just stop your business because you're doing an Agile adoption, you still have to keep going. So they'll feel that pressure. You know, they'll be like, all the talks that we've had on governance, like, do I still have governance? All these scary things go through their minds. Teams find it hard to try something new in case they're not good at it. Like I said before, they might be great developers or testers, but really not great Scrum teams just yet. You know, they might worry about what that means for them. They find it hard to stand up to their managers or up to their leads and each other about how they feel. They're not used to doing that stuff a lot of the time. They're used to just sort of coming into work and doing what they're told and suddenly get asked, how do you feel about this? Or what should we do about this? And I'll tell you. You know, and these are the sort of things that we need to discourage from people and encourage people to be open, that it's not a blaming culture, but be open and we value that feedback. everyone is afraid of failing, including me. Everyone's afraid that the Scrum adoption isn't going to work. You know, so let's just all accept that we're all scared, okay? But let's all do our best, okay? Let's all do our absolute best. Then we will reap the rewards. Improvements in delivery patterns will prevail very quickly, much quicker than you think, actually. You'll see improvements in behaviours, so yes, you might have a few arguments here and there, but very quickly they'll subside and people will actually start getting on a lot better. There's improvements in morale and responsiveness. Once people realise that actually I can speak and I am heard, that really increases morale. Improvements in reputation. So, for example, I started a company a while back where their reputation was terrible. You know, it was known as a terrible place to work. Nobody wanted to work there. But then their reputation increased. You know, the Scrum adoption was underway. It was successful. You know, I started going to Agile Yorkshire with one person. You know, in fact, no, I started going just me. And then by the end of it, I think about 6 or 7 people came with me one day, just after the teams. And to me, that's a success, you know, because I know that they'll be speaking to other people there, and they'll be speaking to other people, and they'll be speaking to other people. Before you know it, your reputation isn't as bad as it was. So I've got a controversial point now to make. Okay, so attrition isn't necessarily a bad thing. So lots of people might want, you know, they might threaten to leave, oh, I don't like this Scrum thing, I'm going to leave. Okay, well, you know, you can't stop somebody if that's what they absolutely want to do. And you know what? Maybe they would never be happy in a Scrum environment anyway. Maybe it's just not in their nature. Even with all the support and help, you know, and nurturing that you could possibly provide, they might still just not like it. Okay, and that's just life, you know. But if those people do end up leaving, you've got less threat of your adoption being poisoned by them saying, yeah, you know, whatever they'll say, people are going to say what they say. But if they go, then the cultural change will be faster. Don't get hung up about losing knowledge if people threaten to leave, because that is a major threat to an adoption. If you've got, you know, Super Steve, who built the legacy system, and he goes, if you carry on with this Scrum, I'm going to leave. And management goes, God, Super Steve's going to leave, what am I going to do? You know? Let Super Steve leave. Okay, because you know what? You've probably got some awesome developers in your team. When Super Steve steps out that door, they'll come forward and go, well, actually, I did work on that. I love Super Steve. I know it very well. You know, so very soon you'll start to see the people who before have been poked in the corner, pushed in the corner, come forward and actually stand up, and you'll start to see different sides to the team that you didn't know they had courage. Management needs to step up and do what is best for the team and the business, okay? So again, I'm not saying, you know, just because somebody shows a bit of resistance, that's it, game over. But what I am saying is that management needs to handle this, and they need to do a good job of it, you know. So you need, if you get your people right, then you don't have to worry about product. You know, a lot of reasons that products fail isn't necessarily because of Scrum or Waterfall or anything. It's because the attitudes of the people that work there are terrible. You know, there's a blame culture, or people just can't bother. You know, get your people right, and your products will build themselves. So, implementing structure and discipline then. Coaching and training has to be comprehensive in order to provide the best possible start to a journey of success. You can't expect people to be successful if they don't know how. And I often use this very basic training module. It's open source, you know, free, CollabNet. You know, it's quite fun. You know, but I stop and start the video and just, you know, embellish points a bit further just to help people's understanding. There's a quiz there at the end. You know, and it's just as important to be in that quiz and get them to do it as a group so that people know why the answers aren't right, just as much as why they are. You don't want people learning a parrot question, you want people to truly understand what they're talking about. Secondly, I know there's lots of arguments for and against physical boards, but in my experience, creating a physical board is absolutely key. It's key. Thank you. It's key for visibility because often people are struggling with the tech teams and delivery because they don't know what's going on. Like, where are you with this project? I have no idea. You know, visibility is there, so anybody can have a look at that board from anywhere in the business, and they'll be able to see roughly, just by looking at how many stickies are on this side to this side, where you are. It's a tool for learning, and I use it so much at stand-ups. You know, when I sort of ask the team, I say, so guys, you know, we've exceeded here. I use Kanban principles a lot, which I'll speak about in a minute. So nobody's mentioned that at the stand-up, you know. So I'm teaching them about giving great updates, but also how to work really well as a team. And I've got a concept called Sprint Tetris, I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. The board allows the team to take ownership of something. Let's not forget that some of these guys have never had ownership of anything in their lives. You know, now they've got ownership of this board. They've got ownership of telling everybody what they're doing and when. Again, people might be a bit fearful of this at first. Like, oh no, that means I can't just sit and, you know, be on Facebook all day anymore. But no, it gives the team ownership of something. They are empowered to keep that board up to date. Consider adding defined work streams and width limits. So that was just what I was talking about then, where I find that adding Kanbans, defined work streams, really helps a team, because often they kind of don't know what, well, they do know what in progress is, but they've not really thought about, you know, the steps that they take all the time. So if I put that on the board and add width limits to those, it helps challenge that team to keep that flow going. And again, it's something we can talk about the stand-up or at any point in the day. You go, hey guys, you've exceeded your width, but you know, you've not sort of mentioned how you're going to alleviate that at all. Another tip that I do is expand the definition of done. So often I find the definition of done is too lean. It's sort of, you know, in fact, it's one definition of done I saw that it's done when it works on my machine, and I just rolled around the floor laughing. But yeah, just if you have expanded work streams like this, for example, defined work streams, then I've often had a definition of done for each work stream, because then you're asking that team, what do you think it is to have completed dev? You tell me. You know, I would never write it for them. They need to tell me. What do you think it is to have something fully tested? Okay, and again, that goes down like a bullet point list. And doing this is really helpful, and often people said that it's actually the most helpful thing that I've done for them. You know, I'm not saying you have to keep it like that forever, but it's a great way to get started, so your quality is increasing. Finally, set up your ceremonies, all of them. Do them all, okay? Your ceremonies are what provide your structure to your sprints. So every day your stand-up is at a certain time. Every day your review is there at a certain time. So there's no excuse for senior management and board not to attend a review, because it's the same day at the same place. You know. So this structure and this routine is, again, which will provide the familiarity to new teams. And familiarity means that people are more comfortable. It's a new process, I know, but this structure and this routine, they might not like the ceremonies at first, but you know what? At least they know they're going to happen at this time, on this day, in this place. The ceremonies get the right people talking at the right time. So, for example, a big one for this is sprint planning. So in order for stories to be ready for sprint planning, your product owner needs to have done all that work prior to that story going into sprint planning. They need to have spoken to their stakeholders, they need to have got that copy ready, they need to have gone through compliance, you know, they need to have done all this stuff before it's even at sprint planning. Sprint planning mainly fails because that hasn't happened. You know, they go to sprint planning and they expect the team to do half of that work for them. No, that's not the team's job. You know, product owner is responsible for those requirements. Okay? But it gets the people talking at the right time. In the stand-ups, people there at the right times, gets the product owner speaking to the right people, so that everything just flows as it should. It saves time in long ceremonies. So, for example, if you don't have what you need by the sprint planning meeting, for example, it's just going to take ages. I've heard of sprint planning taking 3 days. Thank God not where I've ever worked. But I've heard that sprint planning takes 3 days. It's ridiculous. But it happens. I feel so sorry for those people. So, more on implementing ceremonies then. Allow ceremonies to fulfill their purpose. Don't merge ceremonies together and get them all mixed up. Okay? They've all got different purposes for different reasons. Okay? So, the Scrum Master should help teams prepare for ceremonies. So I'm talking about, for example, getting rooms set up or facilitating them properly. The Scrum Master should also coach the product owners to make sure the stories are what I call sprint fit. Before backward refinement or sprint planning meeting. They have to be ready for sprint planning, otherwise you're wasting everyone's time for it. Coach the team so that they know what to expect from each ceremony. Okay, so that goes back to training. Again, when people know what to expect and they know what's coming, it makes it much easier to deal with. If it's hard enough implementing a new methodology, what makes it easier is at least helping them out a little bit, saying, you know what, this is what we do in the stand-up, this is what it's for, this is what we do in sprint planning, this is what we do in the review, okay, and stick to it. Finally, stagger sprints, because it's impossible, even the best Scrum Master are able to get in 2 places at the same time. So staggering sprints will allow the Scrum Master to be able to spend the right amount of time with every team. Okay, so it's really important. So just, some benefits, I suppose, of implementing ceremonies. It creates the routine. Yeah, it creates that routine familiarity. Have an agenda and a desired outcome for every single meeting. So get into that meeting and say, hey guys, right, today it's sprint planning, the first half's going to be this, the second half's going to be that, and even break it down into time boxes within the time box so people know when they're getting a break. You might need to put time box in there for some email time, or just some general thinking about the stuff, to take, get people into it a little bit easier, so it's easy for them to digest. But nevertheless, structure the meeting. Respect time boxes and incorporate breaks or email time, which I've just discussed. It sets expectations and eases discomfort. So I also like to tick off things that I've done in my agenda. So at least people have that psychological sort of progress in their mind. It's like, okay, we're halfway through now, or we're 2/3 of the way through now, not long to go. Help them hold their attention span a little bit longer, because they are tough meetings, especially at the start. This provides purpose and drives outcomes. Okay, so you don't want to be leaving a meeting thinking, well, that was rubbish. You want it all to have value. Hold at least the standard at the same time and at the same place. Okay, it's often very difficult to get rooms for such long meetings, and I know that's a problem. But there's always the pub next door. Okay, but what I'm saying is that you must at least hold the standard, because I like the standard to be held around the board. Okay, the board is a great forum for it. So that's the first place that you need to start. If you can't even get your stand-up right in the same place, I don't know. I don't even know how to help you. Only joking. So this is the sprint Tetris thing that I was talking about. And it's a really cool little thing to help teams getting thinking about working as a team when they might have been siloed before. So this is my idea, just for the record. I don't even know if it's Nintendo for using the word Tetris, but yeah, anyway. So teams need to know how to strategize constantly in a sprint and work as a team. And Sprint Tetris teaches the team how to work as one. So I'm going to explain it to you now. Who doesn't know what Tetris is? Great. So obviously, the premise of Tetris is for shapes to fall from the top of the screen, and you can say you've got an L-shaped one like this, you can orientate it this way or this way or this way or whatever, and you can move it across from left to right, yeah? And the aim of the game is to get all those shapes nice and squashed up next to each other so that there's no space in between. And if you do that, they disappear and you've got more real estate for more gameplay. If you don't do that, what happens? It's game over, exactly. It's game game over, and it's exactly the same in a sprint. If you think of all of your tasks or stories or whatever, PBIs, in the sprint as a piece of a Tetris game, okay? It might be up to developers to do this with it, left, right. It might be up to testers to orientate it, okay? That's how the teamwork works. So with every single piece of shape that's falling down, you've got people doing different tasks in order to make it work. The end goal of those shapes formulated next to each other, so there's no space, which is also known as waste. Okay, we do not want waste. Okay, we don't want game over because we want to meet our sprint goal. Okay, so that's a nice analogy using Tetris that I call sprint Tetris to help teams. And I even say it months after I'm going to a company. It's like, we're playing good sprint Tetris there, guys. Don't know who we are. You know, so it's just a bit of fun for them to sort of try and get their head around a serious point, really. So controversial point number 2. The team doesn't always know best. Now, software development teams are clever people. There's no doubt in that. You know, it's full of great, people have great ideas and all sorts of great stuff. But they don't always know best when it comes to the Scrum process, because the chances are they haven't done it really, really well in their life before. I work with a lot of younger people, and the chances of them working with someone that's done Scrum by the book excellently is pretty slim. So, they might have some great ideas, that's fine, but sometimes they also have some terrible ideas. And it's kind of, I find that it's also oriented differently by what stage in the adoption they're at. So at the beginning, what I was classed as an immature team, not because they spit their dummy out and stamp their feet, no. I mean, they're not used to the Scrum process yet, they're immature to Scrum. As they're motivated by themselves, what's best for me? I don't want to be in a 4-hour sprint planning meeting. No, that's not good for me. Whereas mature teams are motivated by what's best for us. So they might have been doing Scrum for a good while, and they say, you know what, we don't need a 4-hour time box, let's try and get through this in 2 hours. We know what we need to do now, and we go, okay, sure, let's try that. Or for example, I had a team that had been high performing for quite a while, and they said, you know what, can we do next sprint without tasks on our stories? Because I always just get them to start off by having stories of tasks broken down into them. So I said, sure, try doing that. And they gave it a go, and they said, that was okay, but actually what we found is because they're getting through so much work, they'd actually forgotten what they'd said they were going to do at sprint planning, because they had so much to do in the sprint, so they went back to doing the task again. But the reason is that decision is quite interesting, because I would be very uncomfortable about letting that team, well, I wouldn't say letting them, there's nothing to do about it, but I would discourage a team from taking away tasks when they're classed as immature in my mind, because I'm thinking, you're doing this because you can't bother to write tasks out and you want to get out of sprint planning earlier. But really, when they're more mature and they're motivated by the team, and I think, yeah, you know what you're doing, okay, you'll come back if that's what you want, and that's exactly what happened. So it's just important to make that this discrepancy, I think. So roles and responsibilities then. So Scrum has 3 roles for a reason, and this goes back into the structure. This is a really tough one for companies, because they might not have a PO role, they've probably got a BA role or a project manager role, but they might not have these sort of roles as a legacy role. But they do have these roles for a reason, and the reason being that Scrum will work when each role and responsibility is fulfilled. So if the product owner does everything that she's supposed to do with her stories and her backlog prioritization and speaking to stakeholders, doing all that talking with the business, it will work. If the Scrum Master does what he's supposed to do, and he facilitates meetings properly, and he helps out with the team and removes impediments, then Scrum will work. And if the team do what they're supposed to do, which is be motivated by quality and building the best software that they can and stick to the acceptance criteria, then Scrum will work. So if you try to mix the roles, you find, in my opinion, that I think the quality of the roles are diluted. So for example, if you've got, say, a team member who's also doing a Scrum Master role, then you've got a conflict of interest, because the team should be motivated by quality, the product owner by delivery, and the Scrum Master by process. If you've got a team member who's motivated by quality and also has governance over the process, then the natural thing for them to do is just to want to gold plate stuff and bypass the process. We'll do it anyway, but it's not what we're supposed to do. It's fine because I'm a tester. I understand. We'll do it. Okay, and before you know it, Scrum starts to fall apart because then they take the next shortcut and the next shortcut and the next shortcut. Also, it's difficult for somebody to be a Scrum Master and have another job, just as much as it's difficult for somebody to be a product owner and have another job. Okay? So they don't have time for it. And again, that will lead to a potential failure because people aren't dedicating the right energy into that role. So how can you expect it to be successful? So again, this goes back to management being courageous. So finally, maturity then. You need to keep going if you want to mature at something. You need to keep trying and trying and trying. Okay? But doing it by the book will really help because you'll know what you're supposed to do. Inspect and adapt. Okay, so you know what you're doing by the end of the maturity stage. Okay, but you never stop learning. You always need to try new things. If it stays within the Scrum framework, go for it. You know. Build on good practice on a solid framework. So, for example, you might be at the point where you're delivering consistently and the teams are doing really well and your relationships are better, but hey, why don't you try introducing, you know, something else? Like, for example, you might start wanting to program in a more agile fashion like TDD or BDD, for example. You might want to start moving into really full-on continuous integration. Yeah? You might want to try expanding this further. Adhere to the Agile Manifesto and the Scrum principles. Okay, so when you try these new things, you have to have these at the centre of your mind. So, okay, so I want to go off and try this now. You know, but does this still conform to the Agile Manifesto and the Scrum principles? So, just to end with then, again, after everything I've said, here are the benefits of doing Scrum properly. I am yet to go into a company that has performed worse since implementing Scrum. I've always seen increased and more predictable delivery. I've always seen better quality software, better relationships between the business and technical teams, and more contented teams. Disciplined Scrum does get you there faster. And there is increased creativity as well. I'm working with a team at the moment that have just completely taken it to another level, you know, where it's just staggering, you know, how they work with the product owner so closely, and they've even got to a point now where the team are almost, you know, hand in hand with the product owner. It's so agile, it's fantastic to see, but you know, that wouldn't, in my opinion, have been able to get there if they hadn't have learned how to do Scrum properly first. So now, it's up to you guys, just get out there and be awesome. Any questions?